Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Andrew Turner, founder and host of the G&T Sessions podcast. And today I'm very, very pleased to have Mr. Doyle Buehler on the show. Welcome, Doyle.
Oh, thanks so much, Andrew, for having me. Really appreciate it. And you got up early for this.
Always, yeah, always. Like I've got this like kind of, I don't know, what's he called? A body clock, isn't it? Is that what you call it?
Yeah. Your internal body clock gets you up early.
Yeah, so
which could be a good thing.
Well, I don't know. It depends. I suppose at least you're waking up. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 4:25. My body clock now. You see, because I set my alarm at 4:30, and then it actually gets up at 4:25 a few minutes before, which is a bit weird. But yeah, what about you? What time do you get up?
I set my clock for 7:30. So.
Oh, I know it's a bit later for where you are, but I mean that's a little mystery about where you are today, isn't it? Or maybe we could actually. So where are you today in the world, Mr. Buehler?
I'm on Australian Western Standard Time, GMT +8. Does that narrow it down?
So he's having his afternoon tea. He's just about to stop for tea at about 3 o'clock.
Yeah, or an espresso, in my case. So yeah,
that's good. Well, I know actually that we've been talking about getting you on the show for quite a few years.
Yeah, no kidding.
It was actually back in the pandemic. I remember we were messaging each other.
Yeah.
Remember that thing that's not supposed to talk about? Not supposed to talk about anymore. What was that? What was that? That was
really
a movie. Just a movie.
Didn't that go fast though? When you look back, I think I don't know.
Well, you wait till the next one comes along, and then we'll be, it's like Star Wars episode. It's like Return of the Sith. It's like
the
Force Awakens.
yeah, exactly. So
I know. Back in 2020, which is now a few years ago, you brought out something which was, I think, very, very good piece of work, which was actually, if in doubt, put .digital at the end of it. I think you've kind of what do you call it? You own most of the domains that relate to digital. I think that's my take, which is a good thing. It's like real estate, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. No, for sure. And that's, you kind of have to sort of plant your flag in the ground and say, this is kind of where my piece of the pie or whatever. So yeah, look, I was just looking at how you can sort of leverage that as well. Cause a lot of .coms are taken, quite honestly. The general ones are, but obviously more specific they are, the better. And that's why you have all these different names, like Shopify and Spotify and all these other where it's not really a word, it's kind of a made up word. Lately .io as well. So yeah, it was all kind of seeing which domains are the best to be able to use and that sort of thing. So and digital makes sense.
Oh no, it's good because it's short enough as well, isn't it? So it's you don't want to have a really long domain name and then a really long extension as well. That would be like internet heresy. Yeah,
true. But it does add a couple extra letters as well, so to a .com.
So what? So you said .io, because I've got a few .ios. Because is it in some kind of island somewhere or something? Is this actually a physical location for it?
Good question. Yeah, it must be, because I've noticed quite a few using that one. And then recently the .ais, they're like selling like hotcakes, as they say. Lots to...
It's British Indian Ocean Territory, apparently.
Is that what it is? Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I think I might have actually gotten an IO. Yeah.
See, the British, you see, it's world domination again, you see, 2.0, yeah?
Yeah, there you go.
There's got to be a British... Somebody's put a Union Jack on this island somewhere.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So for people that don't know Doyle, obviously I've got an advantage because I do know you. So how would you explain what you do or what you've done, and what's your kind of part of the internet that you dominate and you look after?
Well, that's a pretty loaded question. You can tell by
it's not meant to be. It's not meant to be.
By my slightly graying hair and bushy eyebrows that I've been around for a while. Yeah, look, I've been in business for like 20 years. After taking my Master of Business in Canada and built one of the top 50 fastest growing companies in Canada in 2008 it was, and the fastest growing in the province, and that was in e-commerce. So that's basically what got me started in sort of the whole digital space back in 2002. And then since being in Australia is looking at more sort of how do we help businesses kind of define that strategic foundation. Because one of the ways that we were able to become one of the top 50 fastest growing companies was we had what I call a strategic architecture, right? A very formal, not necessarily a document, but more of a visual in terms of, what is the business about? How do we provide value? So it's a step beyond kind of the SWOT analysis and the vision and mission and that sort of thing.
Oh yeah,
it's an architecture.
The pestle analysis. Get your Michael Porter book out next.
Yeah. No kidding. So it's a little bit just kind of taking that and reflecting on it as an architecture. Like if you want to build a strong foundation, where do you start? You start with, or strong business rather, you start with that foundation. And to me, that's really important to be able to do that. So making sure that you have the pieces that you're able to build that foundation. And so, so that's my space. Is sort of helping businesses with their developing their strategy, and whether you call that a brand strategy or a strategic architecture, it doesn't really matter. What fundamentally matters is how do you do business, right? How do you provide value? How do you deliver that value as well? The models that you use, the creativity that you use as well, and that's kind of the last 12 to 6 months. I've kind of been adding these tools that, we've talked about, these creative strategy tools and models to help you kind of build that. So it's not just sitting around a table, brainstorming some ideas. It's more about brainstorming, but how can you use your creativity, and how can you sort of use that fundamental humanness that we all kind of want to add to the mix as well. And to me, that's fundamentally what's important, is how do we actually excite our mind to be able to think more strategically as well at the end of the day. So, did I answer your question?
No, thanks for doing that. I mean, what I love, I first came across when you did your book in 2020. I know you've written books before this, but I think 2014, I think you wrote a book.
Yeah.
Do you want to share the book that you wrote in 2020, just so people maybe watching on YouTube
so there's Breakthrough, Unleash Your Remarkable Brand Value, Influence, and Authority. There we go. So that basically outlines a framework, and to me, fundamentally, I mean, you mentioned Porter, and I like Porter and all sort of that sort of legacy strategy work as well. But fundamentally, what I've been trying to do is
build... So you can't call it legacy; you're supposed to call it heritage, are you? Heritage.
Oh, heritage. Yeah. That too, heritage. But to me, there's a disconnect, and that's kind of where I've gone with this whole strategy storming, which we'll obviously get into. But there's a huge disconnect between the academic side of strategy and sort of the practical business side of strategy. And so this book was sort of that first foray into that, is how can you build a simple,
like create a bridge.
A strategic framework that's really simple, and it's action based. It's not just theoretical. There's specific things that you can do along the way to be able to understand what's really important, so that you're able to prioritize and you're able to see, obstacles and barriers and that sort of thing too. And ultimately, I've found that that's the biggest mistake most businesses make, is just kind of flying by the seat of their pants. And startup world, especially, more mature businesses do it as well, and they think, "Oh, they got a great idea.
The strategy offsite.
Yeah, and making that strategy actually work, and to me, it's hard, right? It's not easy. So if I can kind of create those simpler steps that people can use to go through to kind of take them through a strategy development process, it becomes a lot easier.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Less questions at the end of the day, more of an understanding, better roadmaps, better foundations, better all around. Okay. I've got a much better picture of my environment and what I want to be able to do. So that's fundamentally important.
What I love about your book, the Breakthrough book, is there's so many great quotes in there. Just like there's the Ken Olsen digital equipment guy, the ex-CEO of that.
Yeah.
What did he say? I think I can't remember what he said actually. He said,
I'll have to find that one.
It was about the kind of future, how many PCs were going to be.
Yeah. There's not the room for PCs is like 10,000 or some ridiculously low number, right? And now
Thomas
we know
Watson from IBM in 1943 said there's only capacity for 5 computers in the world.
Yeah, there you go.
I think the funniest one was actually the Bill Gates one in 2003, saying these Google guys, what they're trying to be, rock stars. They'll get bored after a couple of years and give up. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of missteps, and actually, if you compare that to today with the introduction of Chat GPT and AI and that sort of thing, and it's there's obviously like two schools here. One is that you kind of get those similar thoughts and feelings about what's happening. Is that it's nothing, it's not a big deal. But if you've actually like tried it out and experimented with it, you go like, wow, this is different. This reminds me of 20 plus years ago, 25, when Google came out, typing something into Google and it would like spit out these results, and it's like, how did it do that, right? And this to me is that big shift as well. But yeah, I
mean, it's incredible. I used it the other day, and I mean, what I find incredible is the amount of posts about it on LinkedIn. It's like in the stream, it's like everybody's talking about it. But
I think you need to be smart about it as well, and that's really what's important, is using that. I feel that there's a dividend, a human dividend, right? Of about 80% that you can actually, for a service-based business anyways, not obviously every business, but for a service-based business, there's about 80% of things that AI can do that you're doing right now, and basically just wasting your time, or it's not, it's not high value time.
There's a more productive way of creating the output.
Yeah, exactly. So if you could farm this off to AI that does a lot of this automation and does a lot of the initial communication and writing, and even like strategizing, like it's considering what it is capable of doing now. Like you look at it and it's very good, but I would like to see it used as more sort of a creative, a stimulator, that kind of gives you those ability to generate new ideas and new directions.
Yeah, it gives you a first draft. Draft, like a straw man.
Yeah. So you can use it for writing blogs and posts and all that, which is great, right? But could you use it for even more? And I'm thinking absolutely yes, right? You can use it for like curating, what you do on a daily basis. You can use it for understanding some of the problems and some of the concerns of your customer, and kind of getting through writer's block, but also being a little bit more creative. And I think that's ultimately what you want to be able to do, is create new ideas. So you've got the 20% that you can now focus on. That AI, guess what? It can't touch you if you actually manage it properly and introduce it properly as well. So we have to be careful.
It goes back to that thing, there's that hashtag or that phrase, rise of the machines. Like the Terminator scenario.
Yeah.
So, when you see, ChatGPT, and, I think what I'm seeing also is that there's a more wider impact, because people are suddenly realizing, people, talked about AI and all that kind of stuff for quite a while. And then you see something like a consumer tool like ChatGPT, that anybody can get access to.
Yeah.
And suddenly there's like a penny drops with people, and they go, oh my God, this is what it's capable of. And it becomes like it's like a wildfire, becomes wildfire kind of thing across the plane, isn't it? But I noticed that actually, because Tom Allen from the AI Journal, one of the my other guests that came on a while ago, he was talking about Sparrow. There's this new one called Sparrow from DeepMind, those Google guys that were supposed to give up after a couple of years going to build.
Yeah, really.
Which apparently, it's like, I feel, so as I said to Tom the other day, I said it's a bit like a race. There's a race already. It's like ChatGPT comes out and ChatGPT is in the lead. And now we've got Sparrow. Sparrow's coming up on the outside. It's a bit like that. Who's next? Let's get some wacky names to kind of call it.
Yeah, exactly. So look, it's going to be much more competitive. And again, you know, you need to look at it realistically. I mean, could it be a flash in the pan? I don't think so. Um, like a lot of people compare it to like Clubhouse and that sort of thing, but I really think that it depends on how you decide to use it. And to me, that's the difference, right? You have to think, it's going to allow you the ability to think more strategically, and we really have to embrace that. But we obviously have to have the tools then to be able to think strategically in the first place, right? So if you're able to free up that 80%, that human brain dividend, you can focus on that strategic thinking side of it, which ultimately is really important, because that's what's going to create that edge. That's what's going to create that competitive advantage and that real fundamental differentiation. Otherwise, you know what? 80% of your business is exactly the same as everybody else's.
Commoditization.
Yeah, I wrote a huge blog on that. It's commoditizing everything, or up to 80% of what you do. So you have to be the cream of the crop, and you can only do that by the way you think.
What do you use ChatGPT and those tools for, like the heavy lifting, and then what magic dust do you sprinkle into that to actually make it, you know, differentiated? I suppose it's back to those basics, isn't it, of strategy, differentiated position, strategic position, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And if we don't have those even at the best of times, how are we going to have them when, you know, 80% is everybody else's business? So how can you differentiate yourself? You can by building a foundation, by understanding what actually makes your business tick. Right. Yeah. And if you can't understand that, if you don't actually see it, or just take the time to outline it, to go, here's my strategy model, or whatever you want to call it. If you don't take the time, you're just kind of wandering back and forth. There's, you know, a story I tell quite often. I'm a former military pilot, and one of the rules of thumb that they give us is the 5 and 1. So for every 5 miles forward, nautical miles, if you're 1 degree off course, you'll end up being 1 kilometer, 1 nautical mile. It doesn't really matter the units. It's the same ratio. So like I said, if you're going to a target and you're 1 degree off, you travel 5 kilometers forward, you're going to be a kilometer off target, right? Which is not too bad if you're very short distance. But if you extend that, like going from Sydney to London, guess what? How far is that? That's like 8,000 kilometers. So how far would you be if you're 1 degree off? You wouldn't land in London, right? You'd be in Russia, or maybe somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean kind of thing, or Western Africa.
Somewhere in Iceland.
Yeah, somewhere in Iceland. So the point being is that, look, we need to think about these things as a business to be able to drive that forward, so we know where we're headed, and we know, you know, what even the flight is called, like, or what's the bus called? Like, are we going in the right direction? People want to know, you know, is this the right flight that I'm on?
It's going to be a long journey. It's going to be a long journey, and you're also going to have to take people with you on that journey. And some people might get off the bus if they don't like the journey. If you don't make sure you keep it on the right, you know, you keep going off course.
Yeah,
people maybe get frustrated with that and choose another bus to go on.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, there was Jim Collins, I think, had the metaphor of getting the right people on the right bus. And I kind of liken that to similar, but it's your audience. It's not necessarily your employees and that sort of thing. Obviously, that's important, but it's your audience. And they have to know, not only get on the right bus, but they have to know where that bus is going. Like, you wouldn't go to an airport. Like, let's be realistic. You wouldn't go to an airport, as some people do, but, you know, that's like 0.001%. Go to an airport and don't have a ticket. So before you even get to the airport, you know exactly where you're going. I'm going from Perth to London, for example. And that's like
you, Doyle, because you've got your own Learjet. That's what it is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'll just call them up. I'll meet you in London. Yeah, but that's the point, is that you go, you get your ticket in advance, right? You go to the airport, go through security, blah, blah, blah. But guess what? You arrive at the gate that says London, you know, flight 7272 departing Perth at 1500 hours. So I'm there, I'm waiting. I know that I'm going to get there. Whereas, you know, if we don't think strategically, you just show up at an airport or you go on any flight, like are you really going where you're wanting to go? And that's how I see businesses operating a lot of the time, is that we don't really know where we're even going. Like, what's your destination? And it doesn't need to be like a place. It could be a, it could be a number, it could be a value, it could be, some level of product or service. So, we have to use destination kind of lightly in terms of, it's not like some Mount Everest type location. It's kind of, what's this business about, where we're heading, and that's what this strategic foundation is about.
Is that where you'd link, kind of vision, mission, and purpose? Is that where you would articulate that, you think? Is that still relevant?
Bit. Yeah, well, look, it still is relevant, but I think that there's too much focus just on that, and then you blurt out like your vision. Our vision is to be the #1 supplier of audience gadgets and gadgets. For
there's a big market for gadgets.
Yeah, and gadgets too, and widgets too, apparently. But that's really what you
created a new segment already.
Yeah, but you have to define that too, right? So a vision to me is great, but how do you take that vision and put it into practice?
How do you operationalize
something useful? That's where, again, these tools that I'm developing come into play, because they give you that capacity to see it, but also to do it. It's about creating, but it's also about executing. So we really kind of need to match that up, because right now there's a huge mismatch in, I'm just going to create this business and we're going to sell widgets and that's going to be it. And yeah, we'll have a vision, but how are you actually getting closer to your vision?
Well, I suppose it's also, my observation is in the work that I've done in corporates and startups, is that the thing is that how do you get the individual people in the team to understand how they can impact the strategy as well? How do you get that alignment? That's a big, and especially as your team gets bigger and bigger and bigger. My biggest, probably, when I was at GE and when I was at Tesco, then you got, hundreds of thousands of employees. How do you keep that alignment from the corporate office, the strategy room where the CEO and CFO and the rest of the leadership team are sat, right down to the person that's sat on the, serving the customer on the shop floor. And they did, Tesco did some quite good stuff in that area. I think it was, but it was very much still, the Kaplan and Norton balanced scorecard. It was basically that, like we used to call it the steering wheel, to try and say how you have that, that multi-perspective view on strategy. But there was a hell of a lot of, there was like an industry about keeping that alive. That was the thing, is about how do you embed it and how do you make it, keep. It was like, I wouldn't say a cottage industry, but it was kind of like there was a lot of work to keep it up to date and sustainable. I think that was one of the observations I got, because it was just a scale problem.
Yeah, true. And but one of the problems too is that with the legacy of building strategy plans and that sort of things, is that they put them into a document, and then it sits on a shelf somewhere, and then it's our strategy.
Those binders.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a PowerPoint, you kind of have your brainstorming session and come up with some ideas and some objectives. And it's like, that's not strategic thinking, but I'll continue. You create this document and then you have a strategy review. And then what happens? You pass around the documents to the board or whatever the case may be. And then a year later, it's like, oh, hey, what did we do with that strategy document? And it's like, well, you didn't do much because you didn't actually create an execution plan. And that's kind of where some of these pieces like the Strategyhedron fit in, is that actually becomes a visual that can sit on your desk. It can sit in your office. You can have it in meetings. So it's like a 3D it is a 3D representation of what your strategy can look like as well. And it sits there so you can talk about it and you can review it. And it actually has, ways of developing it, creating those ideas of your business and what you're about and that sort of thing, and then displaying it and showing people what it is so you can see it and touch it and feel it. And to me, that's the ultimate, objective of strategy, is it has to be kind of, it's clear thinking of the forward, but you actually have to see it and play with it on a regular basis. Otherwise, it just gets forgotten, gets dusted.
And do you think people are, because they're unsure of what to do, that they either don't do it, or they shy away from it, or they don't operationalize it? Is it an education gap, you think, or is it just kind of seen as a highbrow intellectual exercise, and and not always given enough time to, you obviously do the strategy formulation and the strategy execution, so it's a bit like, is there too much bias on the formulation and not enough balance between that and the execution? Is that what you're seeing in the companies you work with?
Yeah, I actually just wrapped up my 2022 strategy survey as well, and I've actually just been going through the stats of it last night. So I asked those questions to industry. So I'm actually going to be presenting these. I'm going to kind of reduce it and distill it.
Are you going to give us an exclusive here? Like a little sneak peek?
Well, possibly. I don't know. But
you heard it here first on the G&T Sessions podcast with Doyle.
Look, I haven't gone through it enough to kind of reach any conclusions yet, just to see the data. But ultimately, I think your question was, is strategy different than execution, right? Do we know how to execute, and do we know how to strategize? I would say no on both counts. We don't really know how to think rather strategically, and then we don't necessarily know how to execute strategically and tactically as well, obviously. And maybe it's because of the internet, and maybe an interesting theory is because of the internet we're pushed into sort of that time urgent, that sort of thing. Somebody posts, I need to respond. I need to post, somebody needs to respond.
That real time kind of business kind of concept. Yeah, kind of pressure from that.
Yeah, and perhaps that's one of the causes, but maybe that's caused us to lose sight more strategically. So people then get caught in that post and blogs and reposting and responding and commenting.
The clock speed, isn't it? The clock speed's going like this all the time, and we can't. We got to respond. We got to. What's the tactics, rather than actually stepping back and doing some proper thinking? Is that
exactly. So if we could kind of reduce those, because honestly, it helps prioritize things. If you have a strategy, think of it as a priority ladder or whatever. One of the simplest ways of doing that. So, and I think a lot of businesses do feel that, I'm not. Strategies, that's for the big guys, or I wouldn't even know where to start with strategy either, and that is an issue, right? Is that you don't feel as a startup or as a small business, or whatever, that you actually need one, but that's probably more of an indicator that you do need one, because you're not really sure where you're going. Again, what destination are you going to? Are you going to London or to Maui from Perth? And will you miss your destination? So making sure that you have these tools.
I think I'd rather be in Maui, actually, to be honest with you.
Yeah, if you're in London right now, yeah. But it's super nice here. It's nice and warm and
okay,
perfectly
right.
Blue sky.
It was -1 yesterday. Okay.
Okay.
No, but I suppose what we just talked about then was about also the size of the company and the number of employees. So if you're a startup versus a FTSE 100 or a Global 2000, are you seeing the same obstacles or hurdles where maybe the founder CEO doesn't maybe he's a technical founder, doesn't understand the strategy process, and there's a gap in knowledge and understanding, and he hasn't been through that process before, so he's kind of a bit unsure about how to navigate it and how to put something in place, and then how to publish something to his team, because he then maybe feels accountable for it. And my observation is that a strategy is you put something in the sand, and then you're going to have to iterate on it anyway as you go forward, but you've just got to work out how you iterate as you develop. It's not cast. It's not like you chip it out of stone and then it's put in a tablet of stone and you say that's our strategy. Yeah, it's not like that, is it? It's not like it's not like an Indiana Jones kind of movie.
Yeah, it shouldn't. You shouldn't consider it as sort of a tablet built or chipped out of stone. It needs to be dynamic too, and again, there's a lot of confusion. Okay, well, this strategy, because maybe it's because Russia had, or Soviet Union had these 5-year plans and 10-year plans and all that sort of thing, and corporations do too. And doesn't I'm not trying to devalue that, but what it means is that we have to kind of get off the the wagon that says that your strategy has to be a 5-year plan, that you know exactly what you're going to be doing for 5 years, and absolutely not. Like in a lot of my training sessions and webinars, I go through the different phases and how long these business cycles are now, and they're not even that long. So for you to have a strategy that lasts, 5 years is not going to happen. So what you have to look at is, how do you actually adapt it? So how do you use that strategic thinking to create that adaptability of what's important and how to prioritize that? And ultimately, if you can get your strategy to be more tactical, to show you those steps, doesn't take away from the strategy itself.
It's more kind of tangible, and you can grab hold of it, can't you?
Exactly. And that's kind of the latest, the brainstorming tool that I have, the Strategystorming, that allows you to do that. So you're able to build your foundation, and then you're actually able to convert that directly into a roadmap. So you have your strategic plan, and you have a way of executing it without question, because they become the same thing. So it can be quite profound, but you have to realize that, right? You have to understand that, I don't know everything. I need to kind of build that foundation. But I don't know, I guess it comes from the fact that the barrier to entry for starting a business is like zero. It's pretty darn small. What do you need nowadays? You need a website. You can go get one from GoDaddy for buy a domain. We were talking about that earlier. Buy a domain for $5. Build yourself a website.
Go and do some cyber squatting.
Yeah. But so there's no barriers to entry. But there's a barrier to kind of getting past the 1 or 2 years or that sort of thing. So we have to look at it that it's like, if there's no barrier to entry, how do we actually survive? Because that means that the competition is just exploded. Yeah. And the capability to be able to do it has been reduced to something so phenomenally easy. So where's your strategic advantage? Where's your competitive advantage? You don't have one. So you have to be able to think of one. You have to be able to build this foundation that shows you that pathway.
Yeah, but like a barriers to entry kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or trying to create a kind of a strong position.
Yeah, because if you don't have that brand position, what do you have? You're just like everybody else. And honestly, there's going to be a huge cleansing, because if you look at it from the perspective that, the barrier to entry is zero or next to zero, and then we have AI that's going to commoditize. I say 80%, and I could be wrong, or I could, either way, let's say, even say 50%, right? What does that mean? Where do these points actually meet? That means the value of your business is like going down. It's not going up automatically. It's going down. You've got zero barriers to entry, massive competition, and then you've got the commoditization of 80% of what you actually do, right? Where does that leave you? That leaves you in a hole.
Apart from that, it's easy, isn't it?
Yeah, apart from that, it's easy.
I mean, one of the things that triggered when you were talking actually was a couple of questions about, have you? I mean, I'm not trying to get your results before you release them, but do you see a difference between public versus private companies? Any view on that?
Yeah, it's. I didn't that is a good question. Maybe add that for the next year. But I talked about the size of the company. So public versus private, that wasn't actually a core. I'm
just thinking, like in the kind of current, you've got if you're a public company, you're listed, and then also, say, for example, you take an external investment as a startup, then does that have a material effect on that process and ownership? Versus being a private family-owned business, or something like that. I'm just wondering, if you've seen a dynamic around that, or a gap.
Yeah. Personally, I would say that they, the family-based businesses have, maybe it's not a strategy, but they do have kind of that piece that's tying them together a little bit tighter than sort of a
like
non-family.
Yeah.
But in terms of private versus non. Or a public company versus private, not necessarily. I think it depends on what you want to be able to do with it. But again, that comes with understanding. So let's be honest, a lot of the bigger companies do have strategies, right? They do have an understanding. They're very thoughtful, and they create strategic plans, a traditional one. But at least they have something. So again, I think it's maybe just an education of the smaller businesses to say, if you want to act like a bigger business, then you need to kind of have this roadmap in front of you that you can at least help you guide you. Like, let's be perfectly honest. Like, it's not it's not a magic book. It's not a magic bullet. It's nothing like that at all. It's still, there's still going to be challenges. Like, even if you had the best strategy ever coming into 2020, right? What would have happened to that? You have to be flexible and you have to adapt. But if you fundamentally know the value that you're delivering, you can adapt. You can be flexible, with pandemics and with, any other things that you can get thrown at, because you're looking at from a strategic approach as opposed to just kind of responding to a changes in the market condition.
It's playing out those scenarios. I think what I like was, I think you got your game plan. You've got these stages, haven't you? It's basically your game plan. I suppose this is where you get the sports analogy to how you play the game. Yeah. How you play the market.
Yeah, no, for sure. I liken it to a GPS, right? We've all used them. They're great inventions. And looking back, it's like, how do we actually drive anywhere? Like, even 20 years ago, like, how do we find those places? Because what you'll do is you'll get the address, you'll put it into your phone, you'll put it up on your dash or whatever, and it'll spit out directions and you follow it. And guess what? It's doing its job. But if you were to ever stop the GPS or suddenly be back in that same position, you'd look around going, geez, I don't recognize any of these streets or buildings or anything, because you're so focused on getting to that objective, right? And that's good. Yeah. So you need to, and again, my airplane analogy from before, like when you get to an airport, you got your ticket already in hand, so you know where you're going. But if you do it again and again and again, if I fly from, Perth to Sydney a couple times, I kind of got a pretty good idea. Not that I'd use the GPS, but you get the point. As you do it more on an iterative process, on an iterative basis, which is your strategy, it's your strategic architecture, it's your foundation. If I'm doing that a couple times, the next time you use your GPS, you might, and it's the same destination, you might look around and go, oh yeah, there's a building there. That's a cool park. And I might want to stop there. You do that a couple more times. And guess what? You might not even turn it on. You might not turn your GPS on. And that's what a strategy does. You intuitively know.
You're in autopilot. Yeah.
You've learned that intuitively, this is where I need to go. I need to turn left here at this building and this street and then turn right and whatever. You know that, but the first time you punched that in, you had no idea. And again, you would get lost if you ever got bumped off or you looked up and it's like, I don't know where I am kind of thing. And that's good. But that just shows you that you need these tools. You need this strategic thinking to be able to get you to your destination. And then you use it on an as needed basis. So that's your strategy, is being able to understand, okay, yes, I need to get there. And my tactics are my roadmap. How do I actually get there? And it doesn't happen magically, right?
Even I suppose the opportunity for you is, when I was just thinking about the stuff that I did when I was at Ashridge with my MBA, is that, we did Gary Hamel, C.K. Pralahad, we did the Henry Mintzberg Strategy Safari, all those things. Our strategy exam was about McDonald's, which you saw the automated, new automated no people McDonald's store that they just released. Obviously now complete robotics. So you think there is a gap in I don't know if you've assessed this, but is there a gap in education around this topic? People coming out of B schools and going into corporate roles or into startups, and is there an opportunity there?
Well, maybe it's because we doing an MBA as well. It's like maybe it's because it is too academic and it's not a lot of practical real life, and sometimes academics don't go into business and that sort of thing too. So you can't necessarily connect the two. So look, there is a huge gap without question that I see. Why is that? I think maybe because people feel that, as a startup anyways, you can kind of just go with it. Oh, I've got this great idea and I just, away I go without worrying about it. Cause honestly, it does take some
effort. I'm going fast.
Yeah. I mean, a big question I had is what's more important, speed or direction in a business? Right? Can you have this?
Depends what kind of car. It depends what kind of car you're in.
Yeah, or where you're going and what the train is like. But yeah, to me, you have to kind of balance those two. It's not one despite the other. It's how do you actually work those? Because without speed,
what gear are you in? You might be in reverse.
Yeah, what gear you're going in. Yeah. So a lot of it, I don't know. I think again, there's a disconnect, and maybe it is just educating business owners and business people that, look, our biggest asset that we have is up here, right? It's not our product, it's not our service, it's how we can, build our competitive advantage, how we can build our brand structure, all that kind of stuff. That's really what fundamentally makes you a distinct business. But we don't necessarily know how to do that because it's maybe it's a bit different level of thinking.
See what you got to do, Doyle, is you got to get that HBR case study, off the shelf, dust it down, yeah, and then you go, oh, this is Blockbuster.
Well, we've all heard that one, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But is learning, because maybe that's from the academic side is we want to kind of use the case studies. Oh, well, this is what Netflix did, and this is what Polaroid didn't do, or Kodak rather didn't do. So we kind of do use
the classics.
The classics. But in terms of a business cycle, like the business cycle of 20 years ago is not the business cycle of today. We fundamentally have to reinvent and reimagine what we're doing every 3.5 to 4 years. Otherwise, we're going to be put out of business. So we have to be very, very clear about what we're doing. The business cycle has reduced from, I think it was 35 years from the early 1900s to 1970s, and then it reduced to half of that from the 80s to 2000, and then another third from 2000 to 2010, and then it's, like I said earlier, it's 3.5 years is the half cycle.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, 3 to 5 years. So the half cycle is, and that means that you have to be able to decide when to get off of the curve, right? Because it's your standard bell curve distribution model. You have to decide when you're getting off to adapt to get to that next curve, that next level.
The S curve.
Yeah. And that's a huge, and look, we're not, it's difficult, I guess, is fundamentally what I'm trying to say is we don't necessarily have the training to understand that and to be able to act upon it. And so that's
what I'm thinking for you. One thing for the stuff you're working on, and is it's a bit like a reboot, isn't it? It's a bit like, literally. I know it's like a technology. Let's reboot the server, let's reboot the laptop. It's a bit like a reboot is needed, or you put the kind of the jump leads on this topic, and you go, let's just shake it up a bit. And that's our conversation. And I remember, obviously, it was your launch event. Last year when Andrew woke up at 2:30 in the morning. Oh, what? I'm sure I saw an invite from Doyle. Yeah. Oh, let's join this Zoom call with lots of lovely people. What was that you were doing then? It was a mega session, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, it was the launch of Strategystorming, and to me, that's that shift that you talked about in terms of how do we kind of adapt our thinking to being able to utilize this and understand how we need to use it and that sort of thing. So that was the launch of Strategystorming, the concept of, business is an art and a science, it's artfulness, it's a whole bunch of things. Like, how can we actually, rethink how we think about strategy? How can we reimagine it? How can we actually make it useful and practical to us as well? Because again, at the end of the day, that's fundamentally what it's about. It's not just a report that we stick on a bookshelf and pass around at the boardroom table. It's something that we actively use on a day-to-day basis. So it was a really fun event, and I brought in, dozens of speakers, and we went for 14 hours. It was a long day.
It was a marathon. That's like a double marathon, isn't it? I don't know.
Yeah. So I started early morning my time. I think it was 7 in the morning my time, and finished at 9 p.m. my time. So it was a long day, and I had thanks for joining in as well, Andrew.
Well, I was there I think for about 3 hours, wasn't it?
Yeah.
About half, two, half. It's like this, and I was asking these crazy questions that And what's this English-Irish guy asking these crazy questions at 3 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah, really. You mean Irish German?
No, it was great. I'm glad I was there.
Oh, you.
I'm glad I was
Yeah.
there. It was good to be there. I love your lab coat, by the way. I'm going to have to buy a lab coat from you.
Yeah.
Because your lab coat's are so awesome. It reminds me of like Ghostbusters. You know,
Yeah.
like, what are you gonna do? You're gonna sort your strategy out. So like,
no, that's good. And look, we need to have some fun
swag.
too. Yeah. Business is a little bit too serious as it is. So look, I just wanted to kind of reinvent some of the things that we do and say, well, what, because if you remember the lab coats when in your high school chemistry labs, like you put on a lab coat and guess what? You knew what
blow
you're
everything
doing.
up. Yeah.
Yeah. You go to blow some stuff up or that sort of thing. And so it was kind of like when you put on your strategy storming lab coat, like guess what? You know that you're going to be going and building a great strategy as well. So like a chef who puts on a chef hat, a scientist.
I have to admit that my nickname at school was, you remember those things, Bunsen burner? Remember Bunsen burner?
Yeah.
Well, what's my surname?
Turner.
Bunsen burner. Yeah.
Bunsen Turner.
All to say is that certain of my ex-school friends, and here I am, declaring on a live podcast, that used to use my that was my nickname when I was at high school.
Oh, okay.
But it was for me because I used to blow too much stuff in the chemistry lab, So I need to get one with like my nickname on it. You have to get a special one made.
Yeah, we can get you a customized one for sure. Because you never, again, we wanted to connect strategy with actually something that we do and something that we are as well, so that we can create something that's valuable and integrated. And look, it's just a kind of fun way of how do we change this scenario? Well, you kind of change the environment around you as well. And it's not that hard. Like you can use it as a brainstorming tool or a strategy session, or just walk around in the shops and people will look at you kind of funny going, why is he wearing a lab coat?
He's been let out.
Yeah, he's been let out. Or are you a scientism?
Maybe you should do like a strategy straitjacket. That's what you should do.
Well, but maybe that's the problem, is that too many people act like they're in a straitjacket. Yeah, and that's what gets you in trouble.
I've got another question. I'm not another question that I want to talk about strategy stuff, but also one I want to ask you about as well, because obviously you've been through an interesting journey already, yeah. And one of the things that we do talk about with our guests on this show is about peaks and valleys. Yeah. So just switching the topic slightly away from our favorite topic of strategy. In terms of peaks and valleys, what would you want to share with the audience today? I mean, what have you learned on that, and any thoughts around that?
Well, I would say that there's a lot of peaks and valleys, and maybe that's what business is just kind of navigating those peaks and valleys. We obviously saw a lot of it in the last, like if you want to compress time, in the last couple of years, we obviously saw a lot of the valleys, not so many peaks, but from a business perspective, I think that's how we're actually able to manage those peaks and valleys, is through our strategy and our strategic thinking. One of the other sort of concepts that I talk about in some of my labs and challenges is what's called the digital expedition, where guess what? We have to understand exactly what you're talking about, these peaks and valleys. And if we're not equipped to do them properly, we're not going to be able to survive. And that's kind of my key learning was, going through COVID, was how do we actually adapt and how do we actually fix businesses so that we have that strength, so that we have that ability to kind of conquer these valleys. Because if we don't, well, guess what? We're not gonna survive. And so that comes from the digital expedition, and that's where these whole concepts of the strategy tetrahedron and that sort of thing come from. Is these are the tools to help us along that entire digital expedition. If you compare it to like, what did we do, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, discovery of North America, exploration of Northern Canada, the Arctic, the Antarctica, these flights around the world. like, guess what? The people who were not prepared were, you know, we read about them in the newspaper that they didn't survive. The ones who were prepared, who had a very clear and defining strategy and understanding, and maybe they didn't call it a strategy, but they had a plan. They knew where they were going. They knew roughly where they had to go. They knew, you know, how to prepare our team and how to prepare our resources and get everything there and all that. Those were the ones that survived, right? And so if we liken our business to, is it an expedition or a safari? A lot of us are content with, you know, just going on the back of a truck.
Watch out for those snakes and tigers.
Yeah.
Watch out for those snakes and tigers, yeah.
But that's all you have to do is watch out for them. You don't actually have to encounter them. If you encounter one, what do? The driver makes a beeline back to camp, and it's like, no, we're not going there. But if you're on an expedition,
your driver runs off and leaves you with the tiger.
There you go. Here, we'll see who's the fastest runner.
It's like Shere Khan. It's like, you know, it's like the Jungle Book.
Yeah. Yeah.
No. I mean, the question I was asking was, I suppose, about you personally. What is any kind of peaks and valleys you would want to share about? Because, you know, the G&T Sessions podcast is about growth and technology. Yeah, and we've talked a bit about that stuff already. About personal growth, about, you know, what was some of the challenges that you've overcome as you've been through your journey, and what would you? Because obviously, you know, what I'm finding with the audience that listens to this podcast is that they're at different stages of their journey, and they want to learn. And what I've always tried to do is bring on guests that have got a really diverse background, and, you know, curate the guests and invite people on that got a really interesting, you know, value add that they can actually help people get their thinking straight. But also that thing about being a bit more open to what they've been through as well. So I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that you could share.
Yeah. Well, I think, it would probably mimic the same, what I talked about earlier, is that there are lots of peaks and valleys. And I guess fundamentally the thing to do is, if you have sort of a goal or an objective, and if you're kind of don't get sort of caught in the day-to-day tactical stuff, you know, that gives you that focus and that gives you a priority. So whether it's on a personal basis or a professional basis, right? If you kind of don't have that, then it becomes, you know, you might not necessarily make it. So, and yeah, I mean, I said it before, like, business is not easy at all. Like, there's high peaks and there's super low valleys as well, both with the business and sort of the personal too. Like, you can grow a business to be the fastest growing company, but also you have these external factors in the world that affect you.
Balance.
We were affected fundamentally in 2008 and 2009 by, you know, the global financial crisis, which crushed our market.
Of course,
as well. So we were a global business, but you know what? There was a huge squeeze, and a lot of our business to business clients just kind of evaporated. So you know, from a personal level, that's quite the hit, because you go from top of the pile to bottom of the pile pretty quick.
Yeah, from you were like hero, you were going to on a trajectory like that, and then it all.
Yeah, and then the next thing you know, the carpet's taken out from underneath you. So, So honestly, I mean, there's a lot of that.
How was that for you? How did you?
Well, it was a big challenge to be able to overcome that as well. And you kind of have to adapt. You kind of have to, you know, continue with what you have. You have to, you know, make some big changes as well. So I don't know. It's one of those difficult things for sure.
Well, you don't fail, you learn. It's that kind of thing, isn't it? I suppose that's what people say, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, they say it's a learning experience.
Being philosophical.
Yeah. If you're not
I mean, what I find fascinating for the stuff you were doing there was actually, because the work you were doing there, which was obviously using Flash technology, I believe, was you were pre-Facebook, pre-LinkedIn, even I think pre-Twitter. Is that right as well?
Yeah, I think Twitter was just a little bit after.
Just starting.
Yeah.
It was really early, wasn't it? Doing e-commerce when you've got no mega platforms to promote through, it's quite a You know, it's kind of like for some people it'll be a phenomenon they won't even understand. They'll be going like, "What do you mean pre-Facebook, pre-LinkedIn?" You know, they can't exist without having those platforms today. It's quite
yeah.
I thought that was really interesting to read that.
Yeah, but you can really see how it's kind of helped, but then how it's also hindered business like recently, because there is so much competition and there is so much activity, and then we lose focus strategically. We kind of get consumed by the day to day. But yeah, there's always that issue of it was pre this, and a lot of the starting points were kind of a franchise model where we were in, you know, shopping centers and kiosks in around the world type thing. So the whole model had to shift as well originally to online and e-commerce. And that was the early days in 2003 and 2004. And we did have to like hard code Flash into the operating system that we had, so that we were able to create these custom designs and that sort of thing. So that was absolutely
because it was analogous to what you built was like what is Canva today. Is that right?
Yeah. It was a designer creator studio, so you can go and they were skins for portable electronics, so they were custom manufactured. Mass customization, so we could take their designs, you could design it yourself online. We had templates that you would select for a certain device, where there was a laptop, a game system, a certain phone, or that sort of thing. You'd upload your design, you'd add your text, and then we would manufacture them locally or geographically distributed production. So in Canada and the US and Europe and into Australia as well. So that was Canva. Obviously, several generations before that, where we could actually produce a tangible product as well that we would then mail to our customer. So so that was hard coded in Flash before, you know, HTML5 and all these other, you know,
before Steve Jobs rung up and said, "I don't like Flash."
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, and then we sort of started to see, okay, Flash is going down the tube. So what do we do? So, you know, you kind of have to adapt for that as well. And honestly, programming that at that stage in Flash was like an immense, expensive job, like hundreds of thousands of dollars in development and automation.
Yeah, it was a hot skill, wasn't it? It was a hot skill to have as well.
And we created these automations too that were brilliant, because it could sort, it could deliver, it could, you know, manufacture and print from anywhere around the world, and you know, scan by an attendant in Paris from, you know, the middle of Canada, and they would scan it and ship it, and then it would be delivered to the customer as well. So,
but you see, what that raises is that classic thing about timing, isn't it? Is that you were ahead of your time. But then if you'd had that model again now, would be you know phenomenal.
Yeah. Well, that actually started based on, there was another project that didn't quite go as well and didn't go as far, but it was to actually take like they were basically like stickers. They were skins for portable electronics, like customizable skins. We actually had a patent for it in Canada and the US. But the next project from that was taking these mass customization concepts and turning it into more of a toy product or a personalized product that you can manufacture 3D. Right. So the 3D printers that you see today, we were working back on that in 2002, 2003. And unfortunately, back then, the technology just wasn't quite there where we could get a good quality product in a very rapidly manufactured time frame to make it sort of consumer ready. So unfortunately, that project hit the stops after a couple of years, but the concept was pretty profound in that, I think we were ahead of our time, but we would 3D manufacture a product that you design online on an online studio, as well as in retail kiosks and shopping centers around the world. And you get the product like that in a matter of minutes, like your photo lab of the 1990s kind of thing.
That's cool. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, one of the things I found out when I was at Tesco, that because Tesco.com was quite an early stage adopter of internet retailing, and then that became our biggest store, globally. It became like a multi-billion-dollar business. Yeah. But the funny thing was, remember BizTalk? BizTalk? I think BizTalk server. BizTalk. It was like a Microsoft product.
Oh no!
It was like a Microsoft product about e-commerce on Microsoft. I know that's sometimes you could say, my friend from school who I played badminton with, we used to play badminton. That strange kind of was was the actual product manager at Microsoft for that.
Oh,
and
wow.
that's, like internet retailing in the early stages, working with Tesco. So it's, obviously another e-commerce companies.
Yeah.
But it's incredible how these things, cross over.
Yeah.
And how these things evolve, So it's fascinating.
Yeah, and that's the thing. No, go ahead.
Sorry. No, it's what you were going to say.
No, I was just going to say, and that's kind of why it's so important. I talked about adaptability. To me, that's one of the key ingredients here about this whole discussion is being adaptable, but understanding there's a foundation of your strategic thinking that allows you to be adaptable. So you don't have to have a rigid, cold strategy that's not dynamic. That's like you said earlier, a stone tablet kind of thing. It can be dynamic. And if you understand, fundamentally what your business is about, like in this case, that business was about mass customization, on-demand manufacturing, and personalization. So if you can tie those three concepts together, you can be extremely adaptive, right? It doesn't necessarily matter what happens. You can adapt, you can play, you can understand.
You can be a speedboat. You can be a speedboat rather than a tanker.
Yeah, exactly. So you can see what's coming, and guess what? Might knock you out, or just might knock you a little bit off course. But again, if you know fundamentally what you're about, then that's your foundation. So it could be as simple as that. Strategy doesn't have to be complicated.
So I mean, I know that was at the launch event. I mean, in terms of the dreams you've got for your projects you're working on at the moment, what would you? What does it look like in the future? Then what would you like? What would you like to happen? It sounds like you're working on some really interesting topics. I mean, it's very relevant, for companies of all sizes.
Yeah, no, thanks. I think fundamentally it's one of the big pieces that I think we're missing is being creative with these tools, or getting tools that allow us to be creative. Because again, the process for developing a strategy is what? It's like sitting in a boring boardroom, having some facilitator brainstorm some ideas, and then grouping those ideas together, maybe doing some fishbone diagrams, and then putting together
cause and effect.
Yeah, cause and effect, and priority lists and all that kind of stuff, which okay, it does work, but the problem is that it's not real life. It's not very creative. And to me, ultimately, what I want to be able to is create those creative moments where we can sort of convert that into a strategy. And that's one of the tools that we developed here was the 3D Stratahedron, where it becomes you're actually using your creativity and developing your strategy. It becomes fun.
It becomes fun, actually, I presume, creating that as well, and actually because you're creating something as a group, as a team as well, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. So it's something simple. It's like a 4-sided pyramid that allows you to be able to understand fundamentally what your business strategy is about, and it can help you organize and prioritize. Like once you've created one of these models, it simply becomes your roadmap as well, and you create it from a piece of paper that you can either print out. We have an app that we're developing, or you create it on what I call the strategy whiteboard. So this is an actual whiteboard that you actually
you can write like a marker on that.
Yeah, you can write with the erasable markers, and then you create this as your strategy model that produces, again, your strategy model that you can actually work and use and see, and you can see where the interactions are, what's really important, and the vertices, like we talked about, your core objectives and that sort of thing, your vision. So if you can see at the peak of this, it comes down to a couple issues: clarity, certainty, and competency. And if we can understand those through this template of this business model, we can actually produce some great things, and we can see how these sides interact, and we can actually fundamentally include creativity in our solution. And to me, that's the exciting part. It's like, how can we bring all these tools together? There's a tool called the Thinkerboard tool from a company out of Hong Kong, and we're teaming up together because it's like a brainstorming board, and we can actually take our model and use it to create a specific month by month, week by week roadmap as well. So we can actually do that. So we can combine the strategy, right? Combine the strategy that we developed, this foundation, into an actual roadmap that
comes alive, then, basically.
That comes alive. And these are sort of some of the templates that we're working through.
Oh, cool.
So it's a flight plan, and we can actually map these out on a magnetic board. So we've taken Again, I don't want to go into too much depth, but we've taken all of these different vertices, we've converted into this roadmap, and guess what? It becomes our plan forward. And to me, that's what's missing. It's
cool.
The creativity to understand what fundamentally is our business model about, and then converting
and using
that
things
into
that
steps.
And you analogizing the things that people understand as well, that can relate to them as well.
Yeah, like simple things, like some. I'm working on some flashcard type products where we can go through an exercise of strategic thinking as well, and other tools as well that allow us to kind of think a little bit differently and see things a little bit more creatively. Because again, I talked about that margin, that dividend. We've got this margin that's going down, and I don't mean the financial one. I mean the intellectual margin. And so if we're missing out on that, then we're going to be in big trouble. But if we can leverage that intellectual margin between barriers to entry and AI automations and our
tacit
business
knowledge that people are in people's heads.
How do we pull that out? And that's one of the funnest things is actually being able to pull that out. And I mentioned it earlier, like that's one of these worksheets that I'm happy to give to your listeners as well. I call it the strategy canvas, but it actually walks you through the different steps of creating one of these models and downloading the stuff from your head into buckets and groups or whatever, and being able to then formulate it into a specific roadmap that gets you somewhere. It builds you that traction. It builds you that confidence to be able to see things a little bit differently. Because when have you ever been able to see your business model in 3D? Right? Never.
It's usually a deck. It's about
a slide deck.
You can use as a doorstep.
Yeah, there you go. Use as a doorstop, or to raise the table. It's the table's tilting. Let's put it under the table leg to give it a bit of height. Yeah, but see, I wanted to create something. That's what strategy storming is being able to take strategy a little bit differently and to use it. Right? Let's use it.
That's what's reminded me. So one of the final question I got, a couple of the final questions was who should own strategy in a company?
Everybody.
Who should own and drive it?
Everybody. I think we all need to be a part of it. Because if you don't, you're just somebody working on the outside. So I think everybody should be involved in that. From a leadership perspective, you have to have like somebody obviously pursue that. There's actually been a lot I've seen recently. I don't know if you've seen the same, but there's been a lot more talk about like a chief strategy officer. So it's not necessarily the CEO, it's not the CMO, the marketing officer,
or the CFO.
Or the CFO or the operations, whatever. I think it almost needs that separate distinction, because that in itself is understanding how to bring your team together, how to bring your audience together, how to create this foundation, how to adapt to this foundation as well. So, like I said, business isn't easy. It's not getting any easier. So if you sort of attach it to one role, I think it should be something like that. But let's be honest, not everybody
that depends on what size of organization.
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to say, not everybody has the luxury of having these specific, senior executive roles. So ultimately, it's the leader of the business. But I think that if you are the president or CEO of your company, it doesn't matter if you're one person or 100, you kind of need to take this seriously, because that's your competitive advantage, and that's kind of what you're letting. You're leaving money on the table if you don't, and you might not survive otherwise. So it needs to be brought in. It needs to, as the leader, thinking about these strategic decisions that you're making. But you can do that. It's not that hard. Once you see these tools and how they can sort of affect what you're doing.
Well, you're making them accessible, aren't you? You're making them accessible. So
yeah.
That's the great thing about, I think, what the work you're doing here, Doyle.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Making it accessible. That's a great word. Thanks, Andrew. That one. Yeah. I want to be able to do that so that it's easier to understand and it's easier to learn and easier to execute and implement. So we can all be better strategic thinkers. We just have chosen not to.
So a couple of final questions. First one was about, I suppose, given your journey and given what you've covered already and given what you're working on, obviously we have, different types of people listening to this podcast. And I suppose what we talk about is some takeaways, some pearls of wisdom, some kind of like, must do's. What would be your top three based on what you've learned in your journey so far? What would you want to kind of give guidance to for people that listen to this podcast episode?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say, I mean, number one is thinking more strategically, kind of extracting yourself from the day to day, not working, in your business, but on your business. We hear that. I don't know about you, but I hear that so often. To me, it makes sense, but to everybody else, it may not. But yeah, we need to work on the business, right? We need to think strategically. So that honestly is my number one recommendation or priority, because if we can kind of get there, that's super important. The second one I think would be being adaptable, like knowing that business is about change, and business is about understanding that change and embracing change and that sort of thing. So we really need to be adaptable, and don't think that a strategy is necessarily, some stone tablets, or it's not a 5-year plan. It's the strategy storming way of strategy is understanding that it's fluid, it's dynamic, it creates that adaptability, it creates that sort of strategic understanding as well. So being strategic, being adaptable, and the third one, perhaps maybe my own personal feeling is looking into what you can experiment with and what you can try. Like you might have your product that's an amazing product or service that's absolutely brilliant, but what can you experiment with to kind of, how do you make it better? How do you actually refine it? How do you adapt your product or service on an ongoing basis? So I believe that we need to experiment, and you can experiment with strategy too. You can experiment rather with, the trial and error of, specific tactics, what worked. Like you go into marketing.
Get the feedback loops.
What works in marketing? Guess what? There is no magic bullet. There is no answer. You actually have to try it and
you have to pull multiple levers.
Yeah, exactly. So if you can understand what those levers are through experimenting and through, just giving it a go, but it should be kind of not necessarily formal, but something that is structured. So okay, what are the results of this experiment? I'm one of my previous careers as well was aerospace engineering. So you want to be very, defined in terms of, okay, what is it what's the outcome here? What are you going to do? How are you going to test this and that sort of thing? And look, it doesn't have to be quite that analytical, but I think by understanding the experiment and how you set it up, you can actually then define better results. So even if it doesn't work, right, that gives you some great ideas for what can work as well. So strategic thinking, adaptability, and experimentation. There's my three. How's that?
That's a good three. That's a good three. No, that's a very good three. Very good three. Very, very strategic in your takeaways. And I suppose the final one before we finish was about what, given we're in a new year, what are you most excited about this year?
Every year, I think it is an opportunity to kind of to see where you can go and what you can do. So, on a personal business level, on a personal basis, and a business level basis, seeing. Look, we all kind of, not all of us, but a lot of us, revel in the fact that not everything is known, and there is a lot of kind of try this and try that as well. So that's fun, and I think that's part of the life experience. Is seeing what's out there and what opportunities are out there, and how do you adapt to those as well. So that's what I'm looking forward to. Is what new adventures?
Stay curious.
There you go. Stay curious. What new adventures are going to come up as well? So looking forward to finding out.
Okay, well, I'll see you in Iceland.
Yeah,
we're supposed to meet in London, but we'll see you in Reykjavik.
Yeah. Well, guess what? If we both have the wrong directions, we might actually land out in the same place.
I'll see you in what is it called? The lava pool. Is it lava pool in Reykjavik? It's like where you can have that thermal spa.
Yeah.
We can be chilling out in that, talking about strategy storming.
There you go. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you for coming on the show today. I mean, one of the things I was going to say to you was in terms of people getting hold of you and understanding more about these projects you're working on, which I think are really, really cool and really, really, interesting and valuable. What's the best way of finding Mr. Buehler's world?
Yeah. No, thanks. I think honestly the easiest is on LinkedIn. That's sort of I do a lot of events there. So if you're interested in learning about some of the events that I do, the training events, the strategy labs, the challenges, that sort of thing, please connect with me there. Or you can go to strategystorming.co, which is a new domain. .co.
Columbia.
Yeah. And it's shorter than a .com. But strategystorming.co, and there's a lot of programs there and some of the tools and that sort of thing as well. So, and I think, as I mentioned too, that if you could set up a link
we
or
can
whatever.
Put some links in the episode. We can put some links in the episode if there's some downloads that you want to share.
Yeah, you can have a download of the strategy canvas to help you work through this strategihedron model, business model, strategy model.
Cool.
Yeah,
there's going to be all these strategy hedrons. You see, like you have this radar. They're all forming all across the world.
Yeah, exactly.
Like this magic board in your office where they're multiplying.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And I'm really glad we had this session. I'm really glad we had the episode.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it was
you're worth the wait, Doyle. You're definitely worth the wait.
Thanks, Andrew. No, I'm glad we could reconnect too. So I appreciate you taking the time to have the discussion. I love having these types of discussions as well. So thank you.
It's an absolute pleasure. And so that was Doyle Buehler, who is Chief Strategy Storming Officer. Yeah. amongst other
or senior Smarty Pants as well. Some people call me.
Oh, that's right. Yes. As I said on LinkedIn, Chief Smarty Pants. He said, no, I'm only senior. I'm not being promoted yet to the C-suite. And that was Andrew Turner, founder and host of the G&T Sessions podcast. Have an amazing day. Thank you for listening. Cheers. Bye bye.